It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, and this is Monster Mondays, presented to you by Film Seizure. You can catch new episodes of Film Seizure with myself and Jason Oliver on Wednesdays, but Mondays are for me to talk about monster movies. For this week, I want to do something a little bit more fun. If you're listening to this or you clicked on it, then you'll know right off the top that with a title like Bong of the Living Dead, you're not exactly going to see me looking at a highbrow kind of movie. Previously, I've only sort of talked about zombies on Monster Mondays. Sure, I've talked about Cronenberg's Rabid, but let's not forget that while it is zombie-like in terms of a bite or a scratch or something that passes the disease to another person and basically multiplies the effects of that mutation. Sure, I've talked about Overlord, where Nazis were doing terrible experiments to create crazy monster zombie-like creatures. Hellboy certainly has some living dead things, as would any movie about vampires. But I've never really touched directly upon the idea of the zombified dead people. Well, that changes today. But before I get into that, let's talk about how I came to know about this movie. Every year, I attend at least one Horror Hound weekend. I say that because 2019 marked the first time that I've gone to both Horror Hound Indy and Horror Hound Cincinnati. Not only that, but I've gone to a couple of Days of the Dead shows too. All of these shows, there will usually be a table for screen time releasing. Generally, there are a couple of guys who make the movies just kind of chilling there and willing to basically talk to anyone about what they've done and help you find something that you would probably like from them as well. While it can sometimes be not so fun to get a hard sale from people at a convention, I will say that they are excited to talk about what they are distributing and who they've worked with and what they like about each movie without being overly pushy. Part of having a booth at a convention is having some salesmanship and marketing, but that can be a little overwhelming for people on a limited budget or what have you. So I always commend them for being friendly, approachable, and totally cool if they couldn't fit you with one of their releases. Now that said, let's talk about their releases. A couple of great movies they've released are The Barn, which I think I will eventually feature on this show next Halloween season, and Dude Bro Party Massacre 3, which features Patton Oswalt and likely to someday show up over at B-Movie Enema. They don't just deal with comedic tongue-in-cheek titles, though, but they have a definite appreciation for genre. They made a movie called The Sleeper, which emulates late 70s thrillers and even has a bit part for Joe Bob Briggs himself. The Barn was definitely inspired by the 80s slashers. 1031, another one of their movies, is an anthology mixing lots of classic genre ideas like masked killers, scarecrows, witches, what have you. They also care a great deal about music in their movies too. There's not many of their releases where they won't flat out discuss the music in synopses or on their website or include the actual soundtrack with the movie that you purchased. I recommend anyone who enjoys indie horror to check them out at screamtimereleasing.com. There will definitely be something there that I'm pretty sure that you would like if you like the horror genre. Now, as for zombies, there's really only two classifications that zombies could fall under. The first is the classic voodoo-style zombie. These are people either chemically or cursed by a voodoo priest or priestess to serve as somewhat of a shambling, but most likely just simply entranced slave to carry out whatever that person wants that kind of zombie to do. These are pretty much what you'd see in movies prior to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, with perhaps a few exceptions. What's kind of funny is that since the late 60s, it's on a rare occasion that you'd actually see these classic ideas of zombies in pop culture. The most notable exception, though, is Wes Craven's The Serpent and the Rainbow in the late 80s. So let's talk about the other kind of zombies. We'll call these Romero zombies. Most of the time, these are reanimated dead things coming back to life with little to no higher brain functions. Though Dawn of the Dead did explore impulses that the person likely had, or that they likely liked to participate in, like as far as like capitalistic pursuits by shambling towards and around a shopping mall and so forth. That's a little bit more of the higher study and the higher ideals that Romero was playing with in that movie anyway. These guys really, though, don't have a great deal of thought or personality, but they are hungry as all get out. That's the kind of zombie creature we have in this week's episode. As an aside, most of Romero's zombies, as seen in this movie, don't have a clear explanation as to why they were reanimated. Sometimes it's about a disease or radiation, but they just are reanimated. The interesting thing about the best zombie stories aren't what caused them, but how the living avoid them and work with one another when everyone's top priority is to keep themselves alive. As another aside, there is sort of a third category of zombie, the disease-created zombie. These guys are either infected with something similar to rabies, as we saw and talked about in Rabid, or experimented on as in Overlord. These guys do not tend to retain their former personality, but they are quicker moving and kind of technically not dead either. In some instances, they can possibly even speak. All right, so for Bong of the Living Dead, we have a group of slacker friends who work at a video store and spend most of their time getting high, goofing off, avoiding the preppy cheerleaders and jocks that are around town that go to the local college, and end up really just kind of philosophizing about zombies. One night, as some of the friends are doing what they do, smoking pot and arguing about what actually is a zombie and if they could really exist, a zombie outbreak happens. Hal, the zombie superfan of the group, comes up with some weapons and armor and riles up the others to fight back against the zombies and the coming apocalypse, well, until they go out and realize that a lot of other people have already had that same zombie apocalypse plan. Now, while the slackers do nothing more than just have fun, and as much fun as they possibly can during the whole deal, and smoking the rest of their pot, the world is starting to lose against the zombies. Now they're out of pot. They are realizing the reality of the zombie apocalypse isn't all they fantasized it to be, and they are only sticking around and basically waiting for the end. The movie keeps cruising along with these slackers and disaffected youth to a startling turn in the last act of the movie when the zombies have now gotten so large in number, and some of the crew we've been following have started to get too comfortable with doing things that aren't really all that smart or safe to do. Sacrifices are made for a shockingly heartfelt conclusion to kind of this silly stoner comedy. So let's talk about my three things that I like about this movie. First, there are some very funny moments in the movie, and it's almost the kind of comedy that comes with real life. There aren't big, over-the-top jokes or elaborate pratfalls here. The movie's jokes and comedy comes from within the characters and the various archetypes of these different types of slackers and this different group of friends. They are naturally funny, if that makes sense. It just kind of comes out of the actors. The mannerisms and the way they talk is just enjoyable. While they will often say silly things, particularly while stoned, that's not what's really played for laughs. It's kind of refreshing to see a stoner comedy not heavily rely on broad pothead jokes. Now, secondly, I kind of just touched upon this, but the characters are pretty great. There are ultimately three couples in this situation that we follow. Their personality types push and pull at each other, particularly within the individual couplings. John and Tara are two of the old friends who have practically always acted like a married couple. They also seem to be kind of the leaders of the group, and they fight over staying or leaving. Christ is a complete idiot who is just completely untrustworthy, and his girlfriend Danielle is a flighty dummy who just says whatever comes out into her head. Hal is the gung-ho zombie fan, and the girl he's always liked is a practical pretty smart doctor. As a whole, each character is really well defined. Without a doubt, Hal and Danielle are probably my favorite because they're absolutely charming. Danielle for her ditzy innocence, and Hal for how all in he basically is for this whole zombie thing. Lastly, this movie has a surprising amount of heart. The zombies can really be seen as something more than just a horde of flesh-eating monsters. To kind of get deep here, they can be kind of looked at as something more like how friendships ultimately deteriorate over the years. The final act of the movie sees 3 very heart-wrenching moments occur that unexpectedly changes the entire tone of the movie. It's got a ton of deep emotions running through the last 30 minutes or so. You have the weight of everything going on outside basically coming down on you. You have losses that come unexpected and incidents occurring due to one character's negligence. The movie got me thinking about stuff in a deeper sense too. Maybe I was just waxing sentimental here, but the end of the movie really had me thinking about old friends that I hadn't seen in years, that I grew up with, and trying to sort out things that happened that naturally or forcibly sent us in different directions and different life paths. The final minutes of this movie kind of feels that way. This is a group that have been through the best of times, but now they're in the worst of times, and they aren't all going to make good decisions, and not all of our cast can survive this particularly bad situation. I definitely admit to being kind of actually quite moved by the end of the movie. Kudos to everyone involved in the production of Bong and the Living Dead. I was expecting a comedy with a few good laughs and an overall love of the genre showing through, but I didn't expect a really well-written and pleasantly emotional movie throughout the entirety. If you are looking for something a little bit different, take a look at this if you happen upon it. I mean, I don't know if it's currently streaming anywhere, but I would definitely take a look. You could probably very easily get a copy of the DVD or Blu-ray, and particularly check out Screen Time Releasing's website. Well, that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Until next week, I'll see you later, and don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday, and a new installment of Monster Mondays each Monday on filmseizure.com. And also check out new posts at my website, bmovieanima.com, each and every Friday.